Public panic. It's the hard currency of public health research. Organizations and institutions live and die by the research grant, and the more fear they incite, the more funding comes their way. This is not a problem when researchers issue public health warnings based on unbiased studies and fairly interpreted results. However, it's a whole other matter when risks are exaggerated and conclusions are skewed to support a desired regulatory outcome. Such may be the case in the battle to ban the vape. Hardly a month goes by without another ominous headline warning of the potential hazards of vaping. These stories source studies from peer-reviewed journals and typically report verbatim the findings as fact and leave out any balancing counter-arguments. You may ask, how could there be counter-arguments in science? Well, that's because science isn't necessarily concrete. It's a process of truth-making, built on competing hypotheses, methodologies, and interpretations, essentially dueling research, and this is what we're seeing happening in the debate over vaping. Based on a review of anti-vaping research and interviews with stakeholders, RegulatorWatch.com has identified several common threads illuminating how research may be skewed. Often anti-vaping research is framed around children and youth when neither are targeted users for vaping. Also, toxicity levels of compounds found in e-juice and vapor are exaggerated and not placed in context. And that context is the harm reduction and massive benefit received by a smoker who switches to vaping. An ignominious example of skewed research is a study just released out of Harvard that led to numerous alarming headlines like e-cigarette flavors cause lung disease. The study tested for levels of potentially dangerous chemicals, zeroing in on diacetyl, which in 2004 was summarily linked to the respiratory illness bronchiolitis obliterans, colloquially known as popcorn lung. According to Dr. Konstantinos Farsalinos, a cardiologist and internationally renowned expert on e-cigarette research, the Harvard study is guilty of creating false impressions and exaggerates the potential risk from diacetyl exposure through e-cigarettes. Dr. Farsalinos also states the study violates a classic toxicological principle that the amount determines the toxicity and the risk. And the levels of diacetyl found are absolutely minimal and not expected to raise any concerns about human health effects. Most glaringly, Harvard researchers failed to contextualize the findings with the potential benefits received by smokers who experience on average 100 times more exposure to diacetyl than vapors do. But wait, there's even more. According to a study in the journal Critical Reviews in Toxicology, even smoking has not been shown to be a risk factor for bronchiolitis obliterans, popcorn lung disease. It kind of takes your breath away, doesn't it? So no need to panic. There are counter-arguments in the science on vaping. And since 2012, Dr. Farsalinos and his team have been at the forefront of international research in the area. RegulatorWatch.com caught up with him before the Harvard study was released, and here is part one of our conversation. Dr. Farsalinos, thanks for joining us. Some background for our viewers. You are a cardiologist and researcher from the Onassis Cardiac Surgery Center and the University of Patra in Greece. You've conducted numerous research studies into the safety and behavioral use of e-cigarettes. So please tell our viewers, how controversial is this topic for researchers?
So the e-cigarette, as you know, is a very hot topic. It's headline news everywhere. It's a very controversial issue. It's an issue which is creating a lot of anger even among researchers, even among myself, when I see something that I understand is false, but it is delivered by the media to the society.
Dr. Farsalinos, you mentioned the media. Are they to blame?
We shouldn't blame the media. The media, of course, they like to publish, horror stories, but they get this information from scientists. They don't, make it themselves, the news media. And that's really unfortunate because the major source of all this misinformation is coming from mispresentation, misinterpretation of science by the scientists themselves.
Why do you think some of your colleagues are doing this?
I can tell you that I've never seen in any other field of research or field of medicine such controversy and such misinterpretation, misunderstanding of what's going on. Unfortunately, it's a field that I'm also seeing quite a lot of poor research being published even by very well-respected journals, which is really not common. I would say it's quite uncommon to see in any other fields of medicine.
Do you think some of the scientists are prejudiced against vaping?
I believe that many of them are ideologically opposed to anything that looks like a cigarette, to anything that contains the term cigarette, and to anything that contains nicotine. Another issue is that the e-cigarette is what I consider a solution to smoking, which was not invented by the public health science. It was not invented by the pharmaceutical companies. It was not invented by the tobacco control movement. It was a consumer-initiated, consumer-driven evolution.
I assume a big driver for that revolution is a desire to quit smoking?
I'm really surprised by the courage of vapers who continue to use e-cigarettes as a substitute for smoking, because they get a lot of pressure, even social pressure, from all these horror stories. They hear every day that what they do is carcinogenic, is toxic. And I've witnessed myself responses of vapers who had managed to quit smoking, and when they hear a horror story from someone who is considered an expert, they throw away the e-cigarette and they go and buy cigarettes.
Dr. Farsalinos, based on your research, how safe are e-cigarettes?
As we learn more and more about e-cigarettes, we are more and more convinced that they are much safer than smoking.
And Dr. Farsalinos, as you know, Public Health England conducted an evaluation of all available research on e-cigarettes and concluded in an expansive report that e-cigarettes are an effective tool to help people quit smoking. And they are a whopping 95% less harmful than tobacco products. In your scientific opinion, how accurate are those findings?
So I think it's a very accurate and I would say even conservative estimation, because we have to understand that most toxins present in tobacco cigarette smoke are absent from e-cigarette, while some others that are present in e-cigarettes, the levels are hundreds to thousands of times less. So basically, the 95% less harm that was mentioned by Public Health England is quite a conservative estimate. But I think it is exactly what the consumers need to know. When you give him something practical, like a number like this, 95% less harmful, I think it's much easier for them to understand.
So if it's so easy to understand, how come so many regulators are making moves to ban vaping?
In the vast majority of cases, they are missing the mark. They are thinking or they are implementing some restrictions which are basically not only unnecessary but unsubstantiated, based on theoretical fears.
And how culpable are some of the public health researchers in stoking those fears?
They have to provide unbiased, balanced information to the smokers and let the smokers decide for themselves. They are endangering their own credibility with all the things that they are saying. They are basically discouraging smokers from using e-cigarettes. And this is a crime. Ethically, it's a crime. And ethically, for a doctor, it is scientific misconduct.
We'll have more of our conversation with Dr. Farsalinos in our final episode of the year. Keep a watch for that. Well, that's it for this edition of RegWatch. Before you head off, please like us on Facebook and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. For RegulatorWatch.com, I'm Brent Stafford.